Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chris Bandazy, and I am chairing the House Bill 737 Study Commission for Environmental and Health Impacts of PFAS Substances. It is October 13, 2023 at about 1:02 p.m. and we have a quorum and can proceed. We have a few members who have other commitments and may be joining us later, including Mindy Mesmer. Welcome, Dr. Woods. So, and a couple of people are on the road and may be listening in if they have the opportunity to do that. And so, if we can, if everybody's had an opportunity to review the minutes that Nancy so graciously compiled for us, are we able to take a motion on that, or do people need more time to digest?
I'll move that we accept the minutes.
And I'll second. Yep.
By Rosemary and second by Laureen. And all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Denise, I note your abstention. Everyone else has voted in the affirmative, so that passes. And I'm going to be taking notes just because it's been so difficult just to make sure everybody gets here. So bear with me while I do things, multitask. I would like to wait on Mike Wimsatt and Leanne's presentations, so maybe people joining us late can hear those and move forward. Maureen, you were kind enough to send us with a summary of new legislation.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, commissioners. This is the season where we have two tracking charts simultaneously, because the previous tracking chart has at least three, or rather four, retained bills that are still alive. So I'll start with those before I get to the new chart. Those bills that are still in committee as retained bills are House Bill 465 with a hearing or a work session on October 17th in Commerce Committee. House Bill 242, also in the Commerce Committee with a work session on October 17th. House Bill 414, retained in the Commerce Committee. They had a work session on September 20th, but I'm not sure of the outcome related to that. And then House Bill 398 in Resources, Recreation, and Development has a work session on November 1st at 11. That brings us to the new tracking chart. And for those who are either on this call or listening from afar, who would like to have access to it and don't already, can certainly let me know or anybody know. Anyone with the link can access it as a Google Doc. There are at least 12 bills on it so far. It's a very rough chart considering none of the LSRs have bill numbers yet, certainly haven't been assigned to committees yet, and a full list of sponsors hasn't been published, nor has the text. So all of the potential bills that are on the new chart are listed by title only and the prime sponsor. Also, the chart was renamed from water to PFAS as a suggestion by Laureen Allen. So if you have a search mechanism and you're searching for water, please search for PFAS in replacement of that so you can find the chart easily. And that should do it. Much more to come on what we'll see in 2024. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Maureen, what did you say the total was now for 2020?
Looks like it's going to be 12.
Well, okay.
Mr. Chair,
Whenever I printed it. Yes, Rosemary.
I don't know if I misheard Representative Mooney or not, but the November 1st meeting of the Resources, Recreation and Development Committee is an executive session. Our work session, our subcommittee meetings are on next week on Wednesday, the 18th, but on November 1st, we'll actually be voting on those retained bills.
Thank you.
Should also add too on the new chart are only House bills, potential House bills. Senate bills or potential bills are not on the chart as of yet.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. And any questions on pending legislation, new legislation? If not, I just wanted to mention the Sackett v. EPA decision, because, you know, in my own mind last year, I thought that with the EPA developing some PFAS MCLs and with the way they have occupied the field of regulating stormwater and wetlands, that might not be something that we had to deal with as the state of New Hampshire and individual municipalities very much. But the Sackett decision really does carve out what's covered by the Clean Water Act and you know, limits it to things that are connected by surface water, basically. And so looking at our own communities, we have a number of wetlands and streams and brooks that ultimately feed into brooks that are open waters that do discharge into the Merrimack River. But, and I think it's going to be a long time. I haven't particularly been updated in the last couple of months on what's going on with state and municipal stormwater and wetlands, but I think it will take a long time to identify what is going to remain under EPA oversight and what New Hampshire will have to, and municipalities will have to start looking at. So I don't know, Mike, if you have any sense of the wetlands and stormwater side at DES, if there
Yeah,
has
I'm probably not the best person to ask. I'm certainly not the best person to ask here, but I've asked myself of my colleagues, and my understanding is that it doesn't really change. It's not going to change significantly the way that we regulate wetlands because we have pretty strong state laws that govern our state authority to regulate impacts to wetlands. Obviously, it can have an impact on when the Army Corps of Engineers gets involved. So there's still a lot to be figured out yet. And I apologize. I just exhausted all my knowledge on that.
Okay. Dr. Woods. I think you.
Here we go. My apologies. I'm kind of curious. Does Mike have any idea whether the Chevron decision in front of SCOTUS will have any impact in this regard? Because from what I can read, that Chevron decision, if it's fully interpreted, would have rather significant impact on EPA. Would that have any, hate to use the term, but watershed down to New Hampshire?
You know, Dr. Woods, I don't know the answer to that, but I could certainly ask around, see what I can find out for next time.
I don't know if is anybody else following the Chevron decision? Does anybody know offhand? Lorraine, do you have any thoughts?
Well, our state can take any action that DES and or governing body deems necessary,
Yeah.
regardless of federal. States have that ability. So it's always that decision over, do we defer to federal or do we do our own thing? And we know in PFAS, you know, we have to be a step ahead because federal moves too slow. That's it.
So with that, I just wanted to make sure that that is something that people are aware of in an area that we were not going to really stray into, but it seems to be going forward that that is something, whether it's this commission or the legislature in general, needs to be apprised of. Nancy.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, when we're talking about wetlands, something to follow. There are 2 LSRs relative to wetlands. One is relative to the definition of wetlands, and that's LSR 2748. And the other is relative to creating certain wetlands permit exceptions after a natural disaster or flooding event, and that's LSR 2548. So I don't, of course, we don't know what the language is, but those would probably be LSRs for us to keep an eye on.
Thank you. And keeping with the theme of delaying as long as we can, updates from our state agencies, I do want to talk about completing our annual report, our homework assignment here. So I think the format that we have arrived at over the years, using last year as a template, is, I think, excellent. There are parts of the executive summary that would need to be updated. I don't know who was on communications that wants to take the lead on putting this all together. Rosemary, were you doing that, or Lorraine, or?
Yeah, I've read it, and I'd be happy over the next couple days, over the weekend, to get some edits to it, Chris.
Okay. And I know Mindy was working on a health summary. For my part, I'm definitely interested in moving forward with phase 4 of the study, even though we're not through phase 3 for a while, and continuing public education, public information. And there were 2 nice legislative sections. I included one at the end of my summary, but I don't mean to usurp ideas for legislation or actions to be taken, whether they're legislative or not. And in the beginning, there was a great summary of legislative action that had been taken. And I certainly don't want to take the lead on that, because I don't know what I'd be talking about. So if we can mirror that. And then lastly, there was a compilation of bypass operation that was done. It was fairly new. I'm not sure that that's effective at this point. Now that there's a pattern, I'd be afraid that some people just may gloss right over that. But I will leave that to you. And Rosemary, I will bother you next week. And thank you. Laureen?
There's one little piece. I don't know if it should be in our recommendations or, people from DES can just take care of it. We have the great new site, which is fabulous. And but the issue that I realized in the last few months is on the old site, when there was blog postings, they went out to an extensive mailing list and people got that notification. Currently, that feature is not there. So I'm hoping from a communication and public education perspective, it's very important, because people will have no way of knowing about the latest updates or even hearings that are coming up with even the soil, standards passing, where that's at, because we're back to the, old New Hampshire where we all just went and checked and got the news word of mouth. It's not like that anymore. We need it to come to us. So I hope there's a way I hope we still have that email list, wherever it came from, with DES, that they can somehow push out those blog postings and announcements like you did for many years.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, my understanding is there's been some changes in the software that we use and that we're required to use. And it's not clear whether we have that ability with this new system, but let me look into that and get back with you all for the next meeting.
Okay. And Mike, if you can possibly find out the answer before we have to pass our report in, it would be good to include to Lorraine's.
Yeah, no, I will look into it right away, and as soon as I get an answer, I can share it.
Okay. Since we have a quorum, Rosemary, you had a House bill that you're sponsoring along with many others. HB 465.
Yeah, correct. That's correct, Chris. I'm going to call it up now. I sent the link out to everybody yesterday, but this is a bill that was sponsored by Representative Karen Ebel. There's several of us who are co-sponsors, and really throughout the state, Senator Ricciardi is on there. But essentially, this bill restricts the use of PFAS in rugs, carpets, and aftermarket stain and water resistant treatments sold in New Hampshire. And Representative Ebel had asked if the commission would consider taking a vote in support or not in support, as this bill is going to Commerce for a work session this coming week. And she feels it would be helpful and maybe persuasive to the Commerce Committee, knowing that this bill has the support of the PFAS Commission. Representative Ebel brought this forward primarily from her position as chair as the Solid Waste Commission, and understanding that carpeting is something that, aside from other consumer products, the disposal of it can be more controlled in the sale of it, and that it also contributes to PFAS that appears in leachate from landfills. So when someone disposes of rugs or carpeting in a landfill, the PFAS treatment on that ends up becoming in the liquid of the whatever's percolating through the landfill, and it appears in the leachate, and the leachate has to be treated to remove the PFAS before it can go into the liquid waste stream. So this bill, I don't know if anybody's had a chance to look it over, but it does put restrictions on manufacturers, suppliers, or distributors so that they will not manufacture, sell, or offer for sale or distribute for use in the state a rug or carpet to which PFAS has been intentionally added to any amount. It doesn't apply to any rugs or carpets that are being resold or just being on the used carpet market. Anybody that does use, or well, I'll read Roman numeral 3. It says a manufacturer, supplier, distributor shall not manufacture, sell, offer for sale, distribute for sale, or distribute for use in the state aftermarket stain and water resistant treatments for rugs or carpets. And that the department may request a certificate of compliance from a manufacturer that they have not used a treatment. So I think the spirit of this legislation is something that I would like to ask that we support, that we do support restrictions on products that are for sale in New Hampshire, specifically carpet and rugs and PFAS stain water resistant treatments, to prevent PFAS from further being spread throughout our state and through the waste stream. I don't know if anybody has any. Yes, Senator Ricciardi. Oh, even though I'm not chair anymore.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. While I believe in the principle of this bill, I can't vote on something in this committee when I haven't read the bill in its entirety, and I don't think that that's an appropriate thing to do at this time. And also, I have too many questions, like how would it be enforced? And I agree in principle. That's why I'm so passionate about the PFAS and the work we do. But I'm just not sure that I would probably abstain from that without having read the bill in its entirety, and also wondering how would we enforce this? We have to have answers to unintended consequences. I'd like to hear from Commissioner Wimsatt on what I just said and his thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, I agree with you. I mean, a vote of this commission doesn't have any statutory authority. I think perhaps it might be worth a discussion for us to vote on a motion that just states that we support the limitations of PFAS proliferation in our waste streams and in products that are sold in the state of New Hampshire. It's almost like a resolution that we that this commission does support restrictions on PFAS entering, our commerce and in our waste stream.
Maureen, first, then Dr. Woods.
I would just add some information for people to consider, including you, Denise. Several years ago, I learned that 47% of the profits, PFAS is very, very inexpensive to make and very profitable to use. 47% of the profits of this chemical class are directly attributed to textile use in one way or the other. So that really led a group of consumer people from across the nation to realize if we're going to get at the source, textiles are a great place to do this. So that being said, the timeliness of this bill is important for people to know that there's been commitments directly from vendors such as Home Depot and Lowe's, and they have specific dates of phase out. One of them I think already has, to selling any products, carpets in particular, they looked at with PFAS that are added to them or included in production. So that's really good for us in terms of we're not starting from ground zero is what I'm trying to say. There's been momentum in many other states at this point to do this. So the timing is good, number one. And to broaden out, I know this bill is mostly on carpets because that really was low-lying fruit and it's very doable. When you look at the rest of textiles, there have been commitments from major manufacturers such as Patagonia and Columbia, and they have committed in their product line to not use PFAS or not sell any products that have it. REI was a holdout forever, and they just maybe sometime in the summer, they finally gave that commitment also. So timeliness is my point. It's really a good time for New Hampshire to be looking at, how we join clearinghouses nationally so we can look at these products and how it is the time because we're seeing action from the retail sector already, which is great.
Dr. Woods?
Yeah, two things. Number one, my name's Gary.
Okay.
I tend to be rather informal, and so like everybody else goes by Michael and Maureen, I would request the use of Gary if I could. Secondly, my apologies, Rosemary, for not having refreshed 465, but is there any reflection in there about other coverings like play fields, AstroTurf and so forth? Because that has percolated and it came to the fore in Bow when they tried to resurface a play field commercially, and we were able to get that off. I'm not in Bow anymore, but when I was, we were able to get that off of the calendar and defeated. But I think that's a big area. I know Concord is now considering redoing Memorial Field with a covering, and if it does include PFAS and any form of its manufacture or treatments, I think I will certainly be there to, voice an opinion. But does 65 or any other piece of legislation that you're aware of address such play field coverings?
No, not that I know of. 465 only applies to the stain and water resistant treatments for textile and leather consumer products used in residential settings, and that have been treated during their manufacturing process. It excludes products marketed or sold exclusively for use as industrial facilities during the manufacture of carpet, rug, clothing, or shoes. So it doesn't address any municipal use of that. It's really just trying to limit, as Laureen mentioned, with some of the Home Depot's doing, we're trying to limit the proliferation of PFAS treated carpets and rugs and from coming into the state. So it's bringing PFAS into the state that we're really trying to limit that comes in through rugs or carpets.
Thanks.
Hello,
Yeah,
this
I
is
do
Rich.
know, Gary, I'm sorry.
Okay.
One other thing is I know Portsmouth has had an experience with artificial turf. They, in their contract for purchase, they required that it be PFAS free, but it turned out once it was installed, it did contain PFAS. And I would suggest Bo might have a productive conversation with people from Portsmouth about what their experience was.
that got defeated, but it's now, we've moved into Concord, and it's now surfacing with Memorial Field over by the high school to potentially be part of the renovation for that field is to have artificial turf.
So, I definitely understand Denise's concern about us taking a vote specifically on the bill, but if I'm interested seeing if any commission members would be interested in at least entertaining a motion that we, in principle, want to see restrictions of PFAS containing consumer products, specifically rugs and carpetings, from being sold into the state of New Hampshire.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes,
Oh,
Rich.
Rich, yes.
This is Rich Lascelles calling. This might be a stupid question, but does anybody know the brand names that are marketed that contain PFAS? For instance, Scotchgard is a popular brand name. Are there brand names that we know of that contain PFAS?
Well, I don't know currently. Oh, go ahead, Mike. You probably have a better answer.
I mean, I can tell you that, and I can't speak to what those formulations are this particular day, but we know that historically the 3M Scotchgard and the DuPont Stain Master brands were both substantially PFAS related.
Are there alternatives?
Well, I don't think, I'll take a stab at that. Chemically, I don't think there's anything that is on par with PFAS that has the same chemical properties, but there may be other types of substitutions. I'm thinking maybe like a PVC type coating. I'm not really sure about any replacements for PFAS that have the same characteristics that a Stainmaster or a Scotchgard does. But they're probably trying to use other things, but they may not be having the same level of efficiency that that consumers saw in a PFAS type of treatment with the oil and water resistance.
Thank you.
Denise, did you have a comment?
Yes, thank you. I don't see a problem with this committee emphasizing that we understand the dangers of the PFAS, and we, would like to see more of a forward action taken to not have them in products. But I absolutely don't think we should be actually voting on a bill that goes before the legislature.
Okay. Well, similar to what you suggested, Rosemary, I would support a resolution or a policy statement supporting legislation to reduce the consumer availability of PFAS containing products. You could wordsmith it a lot better than I can, but.
Chris.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to take a stab at this to move things forward. I'd like to make a motion that this committee supports the limitation and in some instances prohibition of PFAS containing consumer products.
Second.
Who seconded? Oh, Nancy, okay, thank you. Discussion?
I'll just speak to my motion, just saying that I think with what we know about the health impacts of PFAS, limiting products that contain PFAS from being in consumer items is protective of not only human health, but also the environment.
We're also saying the end source, so stopping the source is fiscally responsible without a doubt, in this state. We have spent last I heard, $134.5 million on state efforts on PFAS. Think about that. That's a huge amount of money. So we can spend money forever and ever and ever, which we will be spending, but we don't need to spend more and more and more as things introduce the stream. They end up in the environment, be it landfill, incinerator, homes. And think about this, Home Depot and Lowe's sell a huge amount of carpeting, right? They agreed to this in a relatively reasonable period of time. That was very powerful to hear that. So they seem to feel they can still make profits and sell and deliver and commit, make this commitment. Babies crawling on those carpets. And then this is a good way to open up to things that you don't think of, like car seats and strollers. These things off gas, and these things have particulate that do shed. Infants are a very vulnerable population. So this is a very, very important topic to get a foundation set for our state for health and wellness.
Nancy.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree. I think if ever there is a place for a commission to support legislation, that's part of what we do, is we look to see if there are legislative needs that we need to address. And I think we all know that given what we've seen the impact on our state, that we don't need any more of this, and anything that we can do to stop the source and stop exposure and protect public health and protect the environment is certainly makes sense. So I see that as I see our role as you know, with all of the work that we do and the number of times that we meet, you know, I think that this is a good place for us to make the work of the commission known, and why, you know, why we feel the way we do. And I agree with Laureen. I mean, I think back in there was some discussion back when the Home Depot and Lowe's carpet issue, the industry had shifted from C8 to short chain C6 treatments on the carpets, and the chemical industry was claiming that C6 was not problematic. So that's, you know, the reality of that situation has come about, and thankfully those companies have done the right thing. So I think there's forward movement. I think this is low-hanging fruit, and I think it's something that's certainly doable, and I would certainly support that. So that was my reason for the second.
Mike, did you?
Yeah, just before we vote, I just wanted to know, I will probably be abstaining from this vote for the same reasons that I typically do as a DES official. But I do want to note, really, as what I think the agency views as a scientific fact, is that we have testified this to the legislature on a number of occasions, going all the way back to 2016, or 17 at least, that if we are to solve the problem of PFAS contamination of soil and groundwater in the state, we are only going to be successful doing it if we get PFAS out of commerce, or at least, you know, to the extent practicable and feasible, because we cannot remediate all the soil and groundwater in the state if we're still adding those compounds to those media.
Don.
Hi, hopefully you guys can hear me okay.
Yeah, thank you for
Good.
joining us.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment that a lot of the PFAS in products it's a matter of convenience in most cases. And I don't see any major issues with banning PFAS in this, you know, limited scope. I think it should be extended to more products, but I would be in favor of this. And like I said, I think PFAS is put into products mostly for convenience, and I don't think that's a reason. That's a reasonable trade-off, you know, to compare against people's health. So I would be in favor of the resolution. Thanks.
And I'm just going to add or echo that our environment here in New Hampshire is very burdened by PFAS already. To continually add to it is only going to exacerbate and extend the probably decades that people in New Hampshire will have to deal with this issue. So unless there are any more comments, I will call for a vote. All those in favor of the motion say aye, or actually raise your hand. And all those opposed. Rich, are you voting on this?
Yes. I'm going to abstain until I've read the bill.
I just want to, we're not taking a vote on the specific bill. We're just taking a vote that the commission supports the limitations of having PFAS in consumer products. I don't know, did you write down what I had, the original motion, Chris? Maybe it would be helpful to read that back.
Sorry. No, I did not.
Okay, I'm actually writing it down. It's like, we support the limitations of PFAS containing products in New Hampshire commerce. So it doesn't, if there's a product where PFAS is essential to life or safety and there's no suitable substitute, this still, our resolution would still support that. But so I just have, we support the limitations of PFAS containing products in New Hampshire commerce.
Denise?
Can you add what you had said before about to solidify because of the health and well-being of
Right,
our-
okay, New Hampshire products to ensure the protection of health, to the protection of human and environmental health.
Thank you.
Gary?
Thanks. Just for some people who may want to nitpick, maybe putting the word appropriate limitation may mollify someone who would look at this as a 100% scope.
Okay, any other, I'll read it back. It says, we support the appropriate limitations of PFAS containing products in New Hampshire commerce to ensure the protection of human health and the environment.
Okay, so I am going to call for another, oh, Nancy.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just not sure that I agree with the word appropriate because I think it's so subjective. I mean, what we talk about often is essential use and versus non-essential use. So essential use is for the medical supply and that kind of stuff. I think appropriate is just, we know what that means, but I'm not sure that they may understand what we mean. And it's sort of loosey-goosey to me. It's not prescriptive.
How about if it reads, we support the limitations of non-essential use of PFAS in products in New Hampshire commerce.
Yep, that would
To
be
ensure the protection of human health and the environment. I mean, the nice thing about using non-essential use is that's part of the vernacular of this issue.
Okay, so the motion is we support the limitation of non-essential use of PFAS containing products in New Hampshire commerce to ensure the protection of human health and the environment.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so since we wordsmithed, I'm going to call for another vote. Everyone in favor? Mindy, you have just joined us. Have you heard that discussion? Yes, are you ready to vote? Is that fair? Okay. All those in favor, raise your hand, please.
Aye. Chris, I'm here.
Okay. And noting abstentions from Mike and Leanne, otherwise passes unanimously. All right. Mike, you want to do your update now?
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. So good afternoon, everyone. So for the New Hampshire DES update, we'll start, as we always do, with the Air Resources Division. No specific updates with regard to permitting activities or inspection. The annual stack test that I know folks were aware was to occur in late September. Indeed, took place on the 20th and 21st of the month. 2 DES staff members were present to observe that test, and all indications were that the equipment and the testing went as planned. That was, as was outlined in the pre-test protocol. So a final report on that is due in November. And as soon as we have that information, we'll be sure to make that available to everyone. Moving on to the facility closure, we talked about this at the last meeting. But just to recap, on August 23rd, DES was notified that the Saint-Gobain Performance Plastics would be closing their Merrimack plant site as part of an effort to restructure its composite solutions business in the United States. Saint-Gobain intends to fulfill its existing orders for manufacturing at the facility, which is anticipated to take until approximately June 2024, so about 8 months from now. Saint-Gobain has indicated that they will continue to work with DES on the ongoing environmental investigation and remediation effort, including providing bottled water and permanent alternate water as appropriate within the consent decree area. DES has requested a site visit. We'd like to go bring a team of DES folks to the facility to kind of really take a good close look at its current conditions to help inform, a discussion and a dialogue with the company about what, decommissioning the facility should look like and what we want to be concerned about and address. So we're working to arrange for that visit now. We'll be hoping to do that in the next several weeks. With regard to the waste division's update, I generally talk about I provide a lot of information about what's going on with the POET system installations. I'm not going to review all of that this time, but my notes, which will be contained in the minutes that you receive for this meeting, are more extensive than what I'm going to say, only because there's things that I've said several times now about the POETs and the issues with confirming that the POET systems are working. So that'll be in there for your reference, but I'm not going to necessarily review all of that at this point. But as you know, Saint-Gobain's contractor Second Wind Water Systems started the POET installation process for residents within the towns of Bedford and Merrimack back in November of 22. And at this time, nearly all the homeowners in Bedford and Merrimack have been notified of their eligibility to set up a pre-installation inspection. In May of 2023, Saint-Gobain finalized a contract with Culligan, so a second vendor, to complete the POET installations in Londonderry, Litchfield, and Hudson. And so the first POET was installed by Second Wind back in December of 2022. And as of September 30th of this year, so just about a week and a half ago, 499 POET systems have been installed. At this time, their contractors have been able to install nearly all the POET systems for properties where the property owners were responsive to that initial contractor notification letter. And their contractors begun notifying properties listed under the most recent term sheets that were agreed to in terms of who's going to get a POET system. And they'll be sending out second notices also to the property owners who were eligible to receive POETs but didn't respond to the first notice. So with that, that's good news. And at the end of the, you'll see at the end of the my notes for this, which will occur in the minutes, there are those graphic representations of the progress on these POET installations, and it's good to see those numbers moving up instead of just reporting zeros. So that's encouraging. Related to POETs also, on July 1st of this year, Saint-Gobain started their POET system rebate program for eligible homeowners under terms that they provided. According to Saint-Gobain, the program was going to provide a one-time rebate of up to $5,000 to homeowners deemed eligible by the company who installed a POET system at their property to treat drinking water for PFAS prior to being offered a system as part of Saint-Gobain's POET installation program. And the details on the program in a downloadable form are found at a website link, and that link will be in the minutes that you get for this meeting. Saint-Gobain has indicated that they received approximately 30 reimbursement requests, which they reviewed for eligibility and reimbursement during September. And it's our understanding they'll be notifying residents of the findings of those eligibility determinations and how to be reimbursed sometime this month. The company is proceeding with design work for water line installations for the towns of Litchfield, Bedford, and Merrimack. And these are areas with both existing water lines where homes require connections to water mains that are in the street, as well as areas where new water mains will need to be installed. The design package for water main extension and service connections in the Hillcrest Road area of Litchfield has been completed, and bids have been received for this work. The contractor's been selected, and contract documents were finalized in September, and the work is anticipated to start this month. The contractors have estimated that the work will approximately take about 5 months to complete. The final design packages for extensions and connections to existing water mains were submitted to the utility providers for Merrimack in the Wildcat Lane and Wildcat Falls and Brenda Lane area, and the service connections that are going to occur there, and Bedford areas. And comments from utilities have been received back. The comments are getting incorporated into a final document, and both packages are anticipated to go out to bid the week of October 16th, so that's next week. Saint-Gobain's contractor has indicated that this will be a 30-day bidding process and will be awarded before the end of the year. It's likely that this work will be conducted in early 2024. Both projects are estimated to take about 3 months to complete and to be complete by late spring of 2024. Saint-Gobain is working with the water utility and evaluating the feasibility of waterline extensions in the town of Londonderry. The conceptual design was completed by the water utility at the end of April and is currently being reviewed by the company. DES met with the company and water utility, that's Pennachuck, in June to discuss the findings of their conceptual design evaluation and some challenges that they had identified at that time. I think those have been worked out, and now DES is in active discussions with the utility and Saint-Gobain to finalize the alternate water remedy for the area in Londonderry. We've reached out to the town of Londonderry on this, or Saint-Gobain has done that at our request, and we expect to set up a meeting in the near future to just to hash that out a little further and try to get that moving. On April 6th, DES received a letter from the company that proposed to delay submittal of an application for a groundwater management permit until completion of a second set of PFAS samples from all drinking water wells at the site. We concurred with that, and that a confirmation sample from all the wells would assist in delineating the boundary of the GMC and developing the long-term monitoring plan that's required under the groundwater management permit. DES issued an approval letter on May 3rd and requested that the application for the permit be submitted to us by May 3rd of 2024. Saint-Gobain's consultant started collection of the second samples in June, and we'll talk a little bit more about that when I talk about water supply sampling. DES has been periodically receiving updated proposals from Saint-Gobain to remedy additional water supply wells within the consent decree area following the initial agreements in April and June of 2022. That includes term sheet attachment 16, and there will be a link in the minutes in the update that will allow you to take a look at that. That's essentially a comprehensive document that includes, basically an updated list of all the safe water remedies for individual properties that have been agreed upon since the April of 2022 proposal. And we anticipate a new proposal will be submitted by the company in November of this year for additional properties that have been identified. And then on to water supply sampling. The company's presented a work plan for residential well sampling and 17 addenda to the sampling plan. And that most recent addenda was approved on March 23rd. So they've been working under that since that time. As we discussed at previous meetings, Saint-Gobain's consultant has been retesting wells with PFOA results that are between 10 and 12 parts per trillion, which is just below the standard of 12, and sampling additional wells within the consent decree area. So results from, and we talked last time about results from that. At the time of the last meeting, there were about, I think, 140 or 150 wells that had been sampled, and we talked about the results of that. And basically at that time, and there's some in the minutes for the September meeting, I've included some information on that and a copy of a histogram that was created. It was also provided with the July meeting, but it was at the end of the document. And I think a lot of people missed it, so I put it again. I put it in there again for the September write-up. But basically, those results with a relatively small number of samples in showed that about 30% of the homes that were tested increased in concentration, 29% decreased, and 41% remained approximately the same. It's good to know that, but more importantly, we have a lot more data that we're about to get in. So at that time, they'd only done 100 plus or minus wells, but now they've done about, as of September 29th, there are actually a total of 900 wells in that category for resampling. And as of September 29th, second samples have been collected from about 740 properties. So a good portion, basically 75% of those that have been targeted. The lab analytical results for those second samples are starting to be received. We don't have all that data yet, but their consultant has indicated that somewhere between 5 and 10% of those resamples have exhibited exceedance of the drinking water standards. So they went up from the original 10 to 12 number. And those properties have been issued bottled water eligibility letters. And Saint-Gobain has indicated that the sampling effort will continue. They're still finishing it up. But we hope to have, I would hope by next month's meeting, we'd have a lot of that data so we could be a little bit more definitive about what the numbers look like for retesting. Then moving on to the previously unsampled wells within the consent decree area. We continue to express a need for additional sampling addendum to complete sampling of all the water supply wells within the CD area. And in the letter that we issued last June, we required that Saint-Gobain complete that sampling of all the water supply wells located within the outer boundary of the consent decree. The company has not agreed to conduct that sampling. We met with them this summer in August to discuss a number of issues, but that one in particular. And the outcome of that meeting was that they were to respond with a letter with a new sampling proposal. And it's the latest we heard is that we can anticipate receiving that correspondence from them probably through our attorneys in late October or early November. So we're anxiously awaiting that to see what they propose. As of September 29th, just to summarize the regular sampling, first-time sampling, and this reflects, of course, everything through the addendum that was approved last spring and the sampling that's occurred since that time. There are a total of 3,845 properties that were identified for sampling. 3,833 access agreements have been sent. And that represents about a 70%, or they get about a 70% return rate on that, that's been pretty constant throughout this process. 2,433 samples have been collected from water supply wells. That's 10 more than the July report. And then 924 second samples have been collected from water supply wells. And that includes the 739 samples that were collected during the summer of 2023. About 1,099 properties have been offered bottled water, and that represents 49 more than the July report. So that's how that's progressing. And if we move on to site investigation, a remedial action plan was submitted to DES on May 5th. DES met with the company expressing some concerns about deficiencies in that plan back in June, and the company decided to submit a RAP addendum to try to address some of those concerns. And DES anticipates receiving that RAP addendum in December of this year, so in a couple of months. And then that more or less completes our usual format. I do have a couple more things I want to present based on some questions that were asked at the last meeting and even some that have come in since then. If you look at the September update, you will see answers to some questions at the end of the text of the document before you get to all the graphics. So those are addressed there, and I direct your attention to those. But there's a couple more that weren't addressed in that, and I want to address those now. And really two questions that were posed. One of them was, how many more wells are waiting to be resampled within the CD area that have either never been sampled or are awaiting resampling? And the answer to that is we're considering that the first time sampling number, the wells that have not ever been sampled the first time, is around 400 based on the queries that we can do of our database. and that includes about 40 properties located within the consent decree pre-GMZ boundary, the area, the tighter area around the facility, properties that are within the buffer areas that are either near landfills or other potential sources of PFAS classified by as were classified by Saint-Gobain, and properties that are located near the edges of the outer boundary where Saint-Gobain's methodology to sample all the homes within 500 feet of a groundwater quality standard violation has not triggered additional sampling. And then as for the wells that will be resampled, I think we've covered that before. I think we've got somewhere on the order. I have to double check this because it sounds like from some of the other numbers I presented that maybe those have already been completed, but I think there may be around 140 more of that 900 that have not yet been completed. So we'll, I think that at next month's meeting, I'm hoping we're going to have a really sort of, it won't be entirely complete, but it'll be a very robust and nearly complete database of the, or a report of all the resampling has been done, the data associated with that, and what the numbers look like in terms of the results. Then the second question that was posed was asked to please provide the number of wells within the CD area that exceed the EPA health advisory level. And you remember those are not the MCL, the enforceable drinking water standards set by EPA, but a health advisory level that they published in 2022 that set very, very low recommended health advisories for both PFOA and PFOS. For PFOA, it was 0.004 parts per trillion, which is said another way is 4 parts per quadrillion. And for PFOS, it was 0.02 parts per trillion. That would be 20 parts per quadrillion. And a query of the GIS layers we have in the database was performed to determine, how many wells meet those criteria or above those criteria. And so essentially, that's well below the detection limits that we have for any of this. So it means basically anywhere that PFAS was detected, and we think that includes a total of about 3,380 water supply wells. And beyond that, we have a bunch of histograms and graphics to show what the progress of POET installation and waterline connections are. And that'll be included in my notes that I'll provide to the clerk, and you'll be able to see those with the minutes that get published for this meeting. And with that, that's what I got, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mike. Rosemary?
Thank you very much, Mike. I have a few questions. One is, how many, going back to your earlier comments, and where you were talking about the extension of municipal water lines in Londonderry, upon completion of that, do you know what % of Londonderry residents will be on municipal water?
I don't really know that. Londonderry does have some municipal water, but it's somewhat limited at this point. I can tell you that I believe the total number of properties identified for a potential water line connection by Saint-Gobain is on the order of about 400 properties.
Okay. And then when I get a little confused because there's all these numbers, and I like the graphs. So yeah, I'm hoping maybe at the next meeting, if you could provide some graphs, historical about like wells being tested, people on bottled water or whatever, so I can kind of see the progression that we've made, getting people off of bottled water and, but considering that there are people getting on bottled water. And when you said 49 people, I believe, since the July report have been put on bottled water, it's something really jars in me that we are discovering even now that people have to be on bottled water, where this contamination has existed for years and years. And now there's just some people where we're finally giving them some relief from the contamination coming out of their faucets. So that's just kind of my reaction, that we're still identifying people that have to be on bottled water, that they weren't identified years ago. That's just me commenting. But how many right now? How many people are on bottled water right now from PFAS contamination in this area?
I'm sure we have that number. I don't have it off the top of my head. It's probably I'm going to guess, given, I mean, the percentages right now are that if you average it out over the 6 community or the 5 communities, it's the POET installations are on the order of about 50% complete. Some more places, Hudson is 75, Londonderry is 61, Merrimack 71. So it's somewhere between, you know, around, probably around the average, somewhere around 60%. You know, I share your frustration with all the numbers. The problem is this has occurred over time, and, you know, early on, Saint-Gobain constructed a water line in Litchfield and connected somewhere on the order of 400 people. And they extended water in Merrimack and Bedford and extended, you know, hopefully. We're not really talking about that so much anymore. I'm trying to stay current with what's still pending. So like the histogram that you'll see that's in my update with regard to water line connections just shows zeros, because we're just talking about people who have been identified to get water line connections and haven't gotten them yet. And it's basically everybody, right? Because as I've just described, the projects in Litchfield and Bedford and Merrimack are still getting bid out and getting ready to be done. And then Londonderry is still being worked out, and we're probably, you know, at least a year away from kind of getting a construction going on that. So, but if you look at it in aggregate, you know, there are so many ways to slice and dice these numbers. And, you know, I think it'd be really helpful to understand what exactly people want, because people think, well, why can't I just ask a simple question and get a simple answer? And the answer is because it's very complicated. There's a lot of history here. We've been at this for 7.5 years, and a lot of work has been done. We try to, in order to make our conversations productive and helpful to this group, we try to talk about the work we're working on right now. I mean, but if there's a desire to have a snapshot of everything that's been done since day one, you know, we can provide those numbers too, and we've done that in the past. But the problem we have, again, we can almost answer any question you ask, but there are so many ways to ask questions, and there are so many different things that people are looking for when they ask these questions, is that it's kind of like a new question every time, right?
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to get at is bottled water is a temporary solution. It's really not a solution, but it's a temporary mechanism to address contamination that's entering their house. So I guess I want to know how many people right now, not right now, but how many current people are still relying on a temporary solution?
Yeah, I can get that number, and I'm going to guess it's somewhere on the order of 400 or 500. But I will get a hard number for you and include that.
I'd appreciate that, Mike. Thanks a lot.
Sure.
Maureen.
Am I unmuted? Yes, I am. I'm listening to this, and from the start, the inequities just really bother me. And I don't know if you've given consideration to this as you deal with Saint-Gobain. For example, Merrimack, as you know, had an extensive citizen education effort right from the beginning on, and we did that to the extent from peer to peer, and we all worked together, and that is why the MVD has successfully worked to filter all of our public wells. And when the medium is fresh and everything's going well, we have non-detect of PFAS, as long as we don't pipe in up water. And when we get closer to medium swap outs, you know, we do have a little bit of the short chain, and they're very upfront about that. And we do advise neighbor to neighbor to continue to use potentially a $200 reverse osmosis, you know, and people give that information to each other because we can't afford any more exposure after decades of it. Now, as I hear about Londonderry being connected to Pennachuck has not achieved what Merrimack has achieved. It's a bigger system. It's different. It's a little more corporate, if you will. You know, it's not that hands-on Merrimack Village District approach. So when we take people from Londonderry, and I live in Merrimack, but I know the harm of these chemicals. I see it in my family and all around. And I think about those 400 plus homes being connected to Pennachuck water. We have not stopped their exposure. So they get off bottled water and they're like, yay, we have a water bill, boo. But we have this polluter, you know, who's, you know, they're paying and off they go. So can we at least ask that those homes receive that $200 Apex system? It has been tested. It tests well. University of North Carolina did extensive work. I followed that data. I've tested my own those perform well. You know, those folks need to stop their exposure. And by connecting to public water that still has PFAS in it, you know, a lot of Pennachuck will be over the federal MCLs when they are announced, you know, next spring, and when those start getting enacted in rulemaking, and then they're going to have to address that. But as we know, when you design and go into that fix, that doesn't happen in a month or two. That's going to take however long it's going to take. You know, those residents are not here on this call. They may not even be watching. They may not even be aware, but they do know when they look around. We hear this in every neighborhood. They see the illnesses, and they've concluded over the years, it isn't just bad luck or genetics. It really is the water. So what are we going to do? You know, this is the Health Commission. You know, we have to think about this from a health perspective. What are we going to do to ensure that when we have solutions proposed in these work plans, that these residents have truly stopped their exposure? And even when they connect to public water, that's not enough. Their exposure needs to end, or at least be what we're striving for with the HAs, because those HAs are scientific based.
Mhm.
So
Sure.
I know that's a heavy ask, a heavy lift, but I feel very strongly about it. And I think that gets lost in a lot of the discussions, you know, and then we hear, well, we can only hold them to the laws that we have. And, you know, I know that, but, you know, what continues to bother me, I would like ideally to be strongly sending that message, you know, every time communications is there with Saint-Gobain. I can't speak for myself. The people don't get a seat at the table. And if we did, that's what I would be bringing up over and over and over. So I would so appreciate if that point could be made in these negotiations and people can do their best to go to bat for us. I know it's not that easy. I do. And I know you're doing a great job. Thank you.
I have a question, Chris.
Not sure who said that, but
It's,
ahead.
it's Representative Ron Dunn.
Oh.
I have a question for Mike. Mike, is there any update on how long the maintenance will be on the POET systems that are being installed?
Sure. So there's a, you mean how long it will continue or what the frequency is?
How long, like, they're asking me, like, how long will it be? 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? Like, how long will the maintenance be before it ends on the systems?
Under the law, if Saint-Gobain is responsible to provide a POET system, they are required to provide the necessary operation and maintenance for the necessary operation and maintenance of that system for as long as the influent water coming into the system from your well doesn't meet standards. If you know, if over time they test it and it starts to meet standards, then they will no longer, and they meet certain criteria for a number of samples that demonstrate that, then they won't be required to operate and maintain it anymore. But as long as the water coming into the treatment system from your well doesn't meet standards, whatever the current standard is, then they're responsible to provide also for the operation and maintenance.
Okay, so for the people that are getting installed the filters, when they need to be changed out for the first time, Saint-Gobain will probably provide that. Once the water meets the current level, then after that, the filters would be the homeowner's responsibility to change out?
Well, no, I want to be clear. As long as the well is contaminated above standards, Saint-Gobain will be required to come back year after year after year to maintain it properly.
Okay, thank
if
you.
at some point the well meets standards, then that responsibility comes to an end.
Understood.
You're welcome.
Thanks for answering some of those questions, Mike. So based on what you said earlier, thanks for doing that look into how many people exceed the HALs as well. So that's about 7,000 people when you add in the people that have already been offered bottled water. I mean, I should say 7,000 homes. So about times 2.5 gives you an idea how many people that might be impacting. Of that 3,380 or so that you said, do you have any feel for what that subset is that's above the proposed MCLs? Did you get to look at that?
I think the way that I answered that question was a total number. So I think that in the CD area, the total number of wells, I believe that exceed the health advisory limit is on the order of 3,300. I think that's
right. So I'm asking, the other question was how many of those people exceed the MCLs that are been proposed by EPA? So probably, a
Um,
subset of that 3,400 or so.
Yeah, actually, I did answer that in the September update, and let me just pull that up so that I can
Okay. Yeah,
make
I
sure I
looked
get
and I
the
didn't see
number
it
right.
quick.
Sure. Let's see here. Yeah, I think that, well, the total additional wells in the CD area that would need that, so we've got a certain number now that have either been provided with a water line or provided with a poet in the CD area. So those are essentially
Or
addressed.
bottled water. Yeah.
Well, yeah, there's still some in bottled water, but basically that's what they're headed towards, is either a water line connection. And then I think that if you look at the number of wells that exhibit concentrations between 4 parts per trillion and 12 parts per trillion, so those would be the ones that are
Right.
above the new proposed standard, but would not have already been eligible for a remedy. That number is on the order of about 1,060 wells.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
The other question I have is the last one, which was about, in prior meetings, you had said there's about 1,000 wells located outside the CD area that the DES ascribed, DES thought was assignable to the St. Cobain pollution. Is there any different number now, or is that still about the same?
Yeah, I think that, I may well have said it that way. That's a hard number to do, right? Because you really have to look at individual wells and the circumstances around those wells to make that determination. And we've really not done that analysis. I think I've gone on record as saying we believe there are any number of wells outside the consent decree area whose contamination may well be ascribed to the company, but we haven't parsed that out. And I don't think we will be parsing that out.
Okay. So I guess what I'm getting at with all of these number requests, it's important for us to get an idea, our arms around the full scope of the issue, as based on some of the questions like Rep. Ron was asking about, just so we all kind of know the entirety of the situation. Because it's hard when they have separate numbers here and there and like how, what's going to come out.
Absolutely.
So my concern about this is, now that they've announced that they're leaving and they say they're going to do all this stuff, I just want to make sure that we've fully accounted for what's going to happen in the future with, revised standards, with holding them responsible for the remedies for these people, as well as, the people that still will see increases in their wells to above those levels in the future that we now know is happening. So I just want to make sure that that's in the plans for DES, that in your discussions with St. Cobain.
Yeah, so to be really clear about this, whether or not St. Cobain operates a plant in Merrimack, New Hampshire is completely irrelevant to what their responsibilities are under the consent decree. Those do not change one bit as a result of them either being there or not being there. So, and they, for what it's worth, their attorneys and their staff have assured us that they intend to meet all of their responsibilities under the consent decree. And so we don't view our work with respect to enforcing the terms of consent decree any differently with them either present, whether, if they're there in May of 2024 and not there in July of 2024, doesn't really matter to us. We're still going to be working closely with them to make sure they comply with their responsibilities.
Okay, thank you.
Gary?
Yeah, this maybe sound like a lot of micromanaging, and it may something that may already be in place. But as testing goes on and there's no supposed further input with the PFAS materials, when a test at a particular site is 0, does that automatically take them off of the grid, St. Cobain, or is there a time frame such that if there's a negative, do they still maintain the treatment level? And then, because as we know, with the aquifer dynamics, you can have one that goes negative, but then turn right around. The next testing would be positive, in which case they would, if they only have one negative as the bellwether to stop their involvement, that may already be in place, but I'd be concerned that they are not looking at that issue.
Yeah, that's a great question. I will tell you that, we're really interested in this data we're getting for the resampling between 10 and 12. We're going to learn a lot from that. That's going to help inform what we do. The work we do to establish a groundwater management zone and a groundwater management permit for this site, it has to be said that this groundwater management zone and permit will be unlike any other we have ever even dreamed about administering. So we're going to have to get a little bit creative with how we do it to make sure it's achievable, but also achieves all the protections that we want it to provide. So that's going to mean sampling. It likely will mean, new samples of maybe homes that have never been tested, or homes that, tested once and tested negative. And one thing to be clear, the fact that St. Gobain's plant is closing doesn't really affect our analysis of how we view the potential changes in the aquifer that will occur over time, because it's our understanding that these emissions occurred over decades and they impacted soil quality, both shallow soils and deeper soils, and eventually, clearly made their way to both overburdened groundwater and deep bedrock the bedrock aquifer. So that's going to continue. That mass loading is still there, and you can blow up the plant and take away all the PFAS on the plant site, and that isn't going to change that one bit. So we still think that the sort of scientific questions about what's going to happen in these aquifers over time is the same. It really doesn't matter that the plant is either open or closed, particularly since, that the emissions were really significantly reduced through the RTO. So we already, whether they're operating with an RTO or not operating at all, probably doesn't make that much difference in terms of what we're going to see happening to the aquifer over the next years and candidly decades.
No, but basically, one negative won't get them off the hook.
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
Any more questions for Mike? Nancy?
Thank you. A little bit off topic, but related. Mike, can you tell me, I just wanted to clarify, because I was looking at RSA 485.3 and C6. We're still at a place, to my understanding, where drinking water rules, if they are, New Hampshire has to enact EPA MCLs, correct? I mean, when the feds come down with new MCLs, we are mandated to at least follow, whatever level of stringency they prescribe. We could be more prescriptive and more stringent, but not less. Is that still correct? I'm looking at 485.3.
Yeah, so the 485C is really about groundwater quality standards, and that's what we use to make decisions in our remedial program. But where the rubber really hits the road for users of drinking water, particularly in public water systems, is under 485, the State's Safe Drinking Water Act. And yeah, through their programs, the general approach is that when EPA sets an MCL, we adopt that as an MCL in a state MCL as well.
Okay, because I was looking at 485C6 and got a little confused where it's that's what was my understanding, that we are bound by those EPA MCLs. But then it talked about, and I know here AGQS is the same as our MCLs, but on 485C6 it says where MCLs have been adopted under 485.3, AGQS shall be equivalent to the standards. But then it says, or where federal maximum contaminant level or health advisories have been promulgated under the Federal Safe Drinking Water Act or rules relevant to such act, the commissioner may adopt ambient groundwater quality standards. So has that changed? Did it used to be will, or?
No, I think the idea is that, to the extent you could have a scenario where for whatever reason, there was a delay or we didn't adopt, our drinking water program didn't adopt a standard as a state MCL, the commissioner could still elect to establish an ambient groundwater quality standard at that level that's based on a federal MCL. So it just gives them the authority to do that if for some reason under the State Safe Drinking Water Act, we had not yet adopted that standard as a state MCL.
Okay, all right. So if when the EPA comes down in February or March or whatever happens, oh, sorry, having computer problems. Then how long will it be? What's the process for the adoption of those federal MCLs here?
Yeah, I'm not sure of the answer to that. That's something our drinking water program would be better equipped to answer, but I can find out how that usually occurs and on what schedule.
Right, thank you, Mike.
Indy.
So just to be clear, the answer to that question is not a direct automatic adoption of MCLs. Is it a shall or a will or a may, or what is it automatic that when EPA says they've set new MCLs, the state adopts them automatically, or what is it?
I think in practice that's what happened. The problem I have here is we're using a law. Representative Murphy's reading from a law about ambient groundwater quality standards, not from the law specific to federal MCLs. So I don't feel qualified to say with absolute confidence that it's a shall or a will or a may, but I can find out what, it's really about how we implement our Safe Drinking Water Act, and that's the purview of our water division. So I'm not quite as close to that as others would be.
Any other questions for Mike? All right, seeing and hearing none, we'll move on to Leanne. Give us our DHHS update.
Good afternoon. We'll give an update and I'll email this out to be included in the minutes, but the $500,000 that was appropriated in the 24-25 state budget to support the New Hampshire kidney incident phase 3 feasibility study, the department had to go in front of the Joint Legislative Oversight Committee on Health and Human Services before any of those funds could be used. And the department presented to the committee on September 22nd with no questions or objections. So we are moving forward with getting things in place to start using that funding. And the next step in that process is to establish a contract with an academic partner to complete the feasibility study. And we have been planning some initial outreach efforts related to the project to begin to engage community partners in the development of the study implementation and development, because we recognize that that's a really important part of the study. So that's all I have. If anybody has any questions.
Questions for Leanne? This may not be a fair question, but does anyone have an idea how long phase 3 will take to complete? Looking forward to having asked the legislature to fund phase 4. Will it be next biennium? Will it be longer?
I don't know the answer to that. I can look into it and get back to you.
Okay. All right. I think we have come to the end of our agenda, and I don't see any questions from the public to respond to. So unless there is any further business to do, we can adjourn. And so, Laureen?
Just a brief announcement. There is an effort by Dartmouth to conduct a study. I had some flyers that went out, and I'm just wondering if you in Bedford have any ideas, if anybody wants to help, spread the word a little bit. What it is a study looking at 40 women from ages 40 to 49 to just join a 1 to 1.5 hour focus group with a couple of professors from Dartmouth to talk about breast cancer and screenings and environmental exposure, and to get their thoughts. They will receive a $50 gift card to a variety of places in the area for their efforts. And this is open to women in Merrimack, Bedford, Litchfield, and Londonderry. So I've been trying to help with getting some participants. We had some women from Merrimack who did one. It can be virtual or they can meet in person. They had a Zoom, but they're really targeting that number of 40 to be able to do something with whatever data they receive from their project. So it's reaching people. We all know that topic, getting the word out, connecting with the public. So if anyone can, help in that way, I can send, what I'll do is I'll send the commission a hard copy of the 2 flyers we have. And I would appreciate if people have any thoughts of passing it on anywhere in your community. We've done it a bit in Merrimack, but it's hard to get out there to Bedford, Londonderry, and Litchfield. So
Well, I'm sure between Denise and myself, we can get the word out in Bedford.
I would love it. And that 40 to 49, that's, for some reason, that's their targeted age group. I had a lot of women engaging who were 50, 52, and I'm like, sorry. So thank you.
You don't count. Okay. All right. If there's nothing further, I'm going to have to take a motion to adjourn. It is my watch, my benefit, since I'm taking
226.
2:26. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. Take care. Oh, Rosemary, go ahead. I cannot hear you. Maybe,
I think she was seconding.
okay. All right.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
Have a nice weekend.
Thank you.